car's garage. In this video, I'll be assembling the XRAY XB2C 22 edition, bag 5 or step 5, the front suspension. So let's get started. I'm gonna put all my parts in my paper plate. Gonna go ahead and open the bag of screws. Alright, so we're gonna need the front control arms, but before we start with that, what I want to do first is polish the hinge pins, the inner and outer hinge pins. So I've got some Never Dull, and I'm just gonna lightly chuck up in a drill and then rotate . All right, just gonna wipe these with a microfiber towel, but they do feel a lot smoother and nicer than they did without polishing. May or may not make a big difference, but I'm here and might as well take the extra few seconds to do that. All right. Now we can take a look at our control arms. We've got the right piece and the left piece, and it looks like there are some nubs or flashing left from being on the sprues. All right, so we're going to need 4 M2.5 by 4 millimeter screws, and these are going to go into the holes next to where the hinge pins are going to go. So it's going to go in the second hole from the outside. We're going to do it from the rear, so the rear only has holes for both, and on the front there's a hole only for one. So take note of that. And carefully shoulder it up. Once it's shouldered, it's good. You don't want to over tighten it since it's small. You can easily strip out the plastic. We're going to do the same thing for the other control arm. Remember, on the rear there's going to be 2 holes, and on the front there's only 1 hole on this side, 2 holes on this side. All right, next we can go ahead and install the control arms onto the chassis. And take note of the orientation. Remember, the 2 screws that you just put in are going to be facing towards the rear of the car. Also, the front of the control arm is going to be flat, and the rear has a shape to it. Additionally, the top is going to be flat, and the bottom is going to have these bumps for where the shock is going to attach to. So this is the left side, and this is the right side. So now we can take the long hinge pins and go ahead and install them until they shoulder out on the screw you just installed. And make sure everything is moving nice and free, which it is. Now we can install this aluminum piece, and take note of the orientation because it's countersunk on one side and it's not on the other. So the countersunk is going to be facing towards the front of the car. It's going to install like that with the 2 hinge pins on the side. And then you're going to need 2 M3x8 countersunk screws. And you're going into plastic, so you don't need to tighten down too hard. Once it's snugged up, it's good. Now we can install the front bumper. So now we can install the front skid plate and the Camber link mount. And take note of the Camber link mount. It's going to install like so. This is the front side and this is the rear. So the front is going to have the cutout and the back side is going to be flat like so. So that's going to install in the like so in the holes. And then the front bumper or the front skid plate will go just like that. And we're going to need 2 M3x16 countersunk screws. And those are going to be a 2mm hex driver. Remember, you're going into plastic, so you don't need to crank down on it too hard. Once it's shouldered up, it's good. Okay, there we go. Now we can set the chassis aside for now and get the steering blocks ready. So they look like they're bidirectional. However, there is an inside and outside. So take note of that orientation in the manual. But basically, it's going to be flat on the outside of the car, and it's going to be beveled on the inside of the car. So it's going to install like this, flat on the outside, beveled on the inside, inside, outside. So we're going to use the last 4 bearings that are metal shielded. So you can go ahead and install those. So next we can install the steering block extension. So this will be for the right, and we're going to need 2 M3x8 screws per side. And remember, you're going into plastic, so you don't need to crank down on it too hard. Once it's shouldered up, it's good. Okay, so take note of that orientation before you start on the other side. So the bevel is on the inside. So this is going to be my right steering block. I'm going to put the bevel on the inside. This is going to be my left steering block. This will be the top. Just like so. So now we can install the stub axles. So take note of that orientation and that you're installing them correctly. Basically, the threaded part of the stub axle is going to be on the opposite side of the steering block extension. So next, we can install the pins in the stub axle. make sure it's even, and then we can install the wheel hex. Take note of the orientation of the channel for the pin. You can go ahead and install it like so. And then we need an M2 by 5 screw to tighten the hex, and that's going to be a 1.5 millimeter hex driver, and just tighten it until that gap starts to close and that wheel hex can't fall off, just like that. And do that same thing for the other side. All right, now we can work on the C block, or the steering block, and take off the flashing from the sprues and trim if necessary. So these are labeled left and right. So I know this is my right side, so we can start on this side. So the lettering is going to face forward of the car, like so. And so what we're going to do here is we have these bushings. We have a tall and a short. So you can see this is the tall one and this is the short one. So the way to install these for the carpet setup is the shorter one we'll install on the top, and the top part of the C-hub is where these two holes are. So you can install the bushing, and then the tall or longer bushing is going to go on the bottom, just like that. So next, we're going to need 2 M3 by 12 screws. Find the best way to do this is kind of like horizontally, so that way the bushings don't fall out. And once it's shouldered up, you're good. Just make sure everything is moving nice and free. You don't want any binding, because that'll cause a lot of stress on your steering servo and could potentially be detrimental to your driving. So let's go ahead and do the other side. Again, remember the orientation. With the left side, L is going to be facing forward, 2 holes on the top. We're going to have the shorter bushing on top and longer bushing on the bottom. Alright, so for the next step, we need these caster eccentric bushings, and the stock setup is the 5 degree. So if you look closely, this one says 5, that one says 2.5, and this one is 0. So we're going to need 2 of the 5s. We're also going to need the 2 millimeter shim, which is going to be the one in the center. So now we can install this steering assembly onto the control arm. And way that's going to happen is we need to install the 5-degree caster eccentric bushing into the C-hub, and the orientation has to be, the hole is going to be facing upward in the front and downward in the back. So this will be on the front, it's going to be facing upward, and the hole on the back side is going to be facing down to give you that kick up. So we know that this is the back side, so when we insert this, the hole is going to be facing downward. This is the front, this is the rear, and we know that this insert is going to be facing down. So next, we can install the C-hub. So we're going to take the hinge pin, install it in the front, then install the 2mm spacer onto the hinge pin, and then we're going to insert it into the C-hub. Just like so. And to finish it off, we're going to need 2 M2 by 4mm screw, which has a 1.5mm hex, and install it in the front to capture that hinge pin. And remember, you're going into plastic, so you don't need to crank down on it too hard. Once it's shouldered up, it's good. Now we can set the chassis aside, and we can assemble the camber links and steering links. So it looks like all of the turnbuckles are the same length, so I'm going to grab 2. And for the camber links, which they call roll center links, we're going to need a 6mm threaded ball stud and a 8mm threaded ball stud. And one thing that surprises me is that they don't have that measuring thing on the side of the manual, so you can just line them up, because there's only 3 sizes that we're going to use in this step. So we know we need the 6mm and the 8mm, which are going to be these 2. The other 2 that we have, the other one that's going to be available is a 5mm thread, which is for the steering link. So let's prepare the rod ends. So looking at the turnbuckle, the side with the adjustment point where it's square profile is going to be right hand threaded, and this side is going to be left hand threaded. Go ahead and use your shock wrench and install the ball studs. Okay, so on the right hand side, you want to install the shorter of the 2 ball studs, so it's going to have the 6mm thread. And on the left hand threaded side, you're going to install the 8mm thread. The camber link, or the roll center link, needs to be 35.7 millimeters from shoulder to shoulder. I can do the next one. So once you have everything adjusted and close to the length it's supposed to be, you can go ahead and install it onto the car and then adjust it while it's on the car because it'll be easier that way. So now we can install the camber links onto the chassis. So we have the adjustment portion of the turnbuckle facing the right side of the car because you want all the left-hand threads to be on the left-hand side of the car. And we're going to install the 6mm ball stud on the innermost hole in the C-hub. Going into plastic, so I don't need to crank down on it too hard. And on the inside portion of the cambered link, you're going to install it on the second hole from the outside. And you're going to install it with one of the conical shims. Now, I messed up when doing this link because I made it exactly like this one, where the 6mm long ball stud is on this side and the 8mm is on this side, but they need to be flipped. So I'm going to remove them and install it on the opposite side. Now that the turnbuckles are installed, we can adjust them a little easier to get the right length. Now with these set, we can make our steering links. So you can set the chassis aside for now. So again, take note of the orientation. Okay, so I'm going to do the right hand side turnbuckle for the steering first. So this adjustment is going to be right hand threaded. This is left hand threaded. So on this side, we're going to need the 8mm long threaded, and on the other side will be the 5mm ball stud. Alright, so I'm installing the turnbuckles a little differently than what the manual is suggesting. The manual is suggesting that the adjustment portion is always facing the outside of the car. That means the right hand thread is always on the outside of the car. However, I feel like the industry standard is you put the left hand thread on the left hand side of the car. So all of my cars, whether it's Traxxas, Team Associated, Techno, even Red Cat, they're all that way. So that's what I know, that's what I'm familiar with. So that's how I'm setting it up, and it'll make it easy to understand and fix your car if you do that throughout. Also, that way when you decide to make an adjustment, whether you're lengthening or shortening a turnbuckle, it's the same movement left or right side of the car. Alright, for the steering links, we want 40 millimeters length, and the rod ends are going to be 90 degrees from each other. So for the left side of the car, we're going to have the 8 millimeter long turnbuckle on the left hand threaded side. So we're close to the dimensions that we need. So we're going to install the steering links onto the chassis. So remember that you're going to have all the left hand threads on the left side of the car. So this indicates right hand thread. So this is for the right side. This is the 8 millimeter long ball stud, which is going to go into the steering knuckle here. And we need to install it with one of these conical shims. So go ahead and put one of those conical shims on. You can put it through that hole. And then on the bottom of that, we're going to install the M3 lock nut. So get that started. So you're going to have to hold back up on that nut, which is a 5.5 millimeter, and then you can tighten up the ball stud. Now the manual says to undo the steering bell crank assembly and install this ball stud, but I don't think that's necessary. I think you can do it without having to remove it all, and just kind of swing it to one side, and you have enough space to put your Allen and tighten it up. And everything moves nice and smooth. We can go ahead and do the other side. With that installed, we can go ahead and adjust our turnbuckles to get the correct length of 40 millimeters. All right, with the turnbuckles adjusted to the proper length for the kit setup, step 5 is completed, or bag 5 is completed. Please leave some comments down below if you found this helpful, if you have any tips for other builders. Please like and subscribe if you found this helpful. Stay tuned for the next video where I build the shock absorbers in bag 6. Thanks for watching. See y'all in the next one.